and government
and government
of the United States
of the United States
and of the state of Florida,
and of the state of Florida,
and the charter
and the charter
and all ordinances and regulations
and all ordinances and regulations
of the city of Fort Myers,
of the city of Fort Myers,
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
domestic or foreign,
domestic or foreign,
that I will bear true faith,
and I will bear true faith,
loyalty, and allegiance to the same,
loyalty, and allegiance to the same,
that I am entitled to hold office
and I am entitled to hold office
under the Constitution of the state
under the Constitution of the state
and the charter of the city of Fort Myers,
and the charter of the city of Fort Myers.
and I will faithfully perform all the duties
And I will faithfully perform all the duties
as police chief
as police chief
of the city of Fort Myers,
of the city of Fort Myers.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Cindy Banyai here for Juice Fresh Talk. Unfortunately, my co-host, Chantel Rhodes, is feeling a bit under the weather today, so it's just me here holding it down at Seed and Bean here in downtown Fort Myers. Came here, I got my two daughters. They're enjoying a wonderful Strawberry Fields drink. This is a nice place to check out downtown, and hope that if you haven't joined us for a live taping of Juice Fresh Talk, that you will at some point in time. We would love to have you come here, come join us a half an hour ahead of the show. We're here at 5:30 p.m. on Thursdays. We'd love to chat with you. And if you're a member and you're a subscriber to the Juice podcast, then you actually get an opportunity to come on air and ask a question with us and join the conversation. We'd love you to join in on that. The new Juice memberships are $4.99 per month, or for a discounted rate of $49.99 for a year. That helps us to keep going here, providing high quality content for you, our listeners, and it helps support independent media here in Florida. So last week, we didn't come into the Seed and Bean. We wanted to let them know that we're coming back, but last week we recorded an amazing special interview with Fort Myers Mayor Kevin Anderson. If you haven't watched that episode, definitely go back and check it out. Watch the teaser that's online, listen to the podcast, and become a subscriber so you can hear that whole conversation. There was a whole bunch of stuff that came out in that. We talked about police brutality. We talked about Tyree Nichols. We talked about the George Floyd. We talked about the policing bills. We talked about what's necessary to ensure that communities feel safe with our police officers. We talked about the free report, which was the report that was done on the Fort Myers Police Department a few years ago in relation to some problems that they were having. So we talked about that. We've had a lot of candid conversations. I talked about how I had actually fought for First Amendment rights here in the city of Fort Myers when I was part of the Occupy Fort Myers movement, and won my First Amendment case against the city of Fort Myers. And we even talked a little bit about race. Chantel jumped out there and asked Kevin Anderson if he had even dated a black girl. It was a really fun conversation, really open, and it was good that we were able to talk in such a candid way, even across party lines, even across race lines, and have an open conversation. That's something that we're trying to do here all the time on Juice Fresh Talk, is have this conversation in a way that maybe we haven't had it before. The biggest thing for me, of course, has been the State of the Union. And I am a huge political wonk, so I love to hear what's going on. So the State of the Union every year is a big deal for me. I live tweeted on my page how I'm feeling about it. And it was a very interesting session that we had this time with the State of the Union. The Joe Biden, I think, came out really strong. Something that was really striking and memorable from the speech for me was when he had Tyree Nichols' mom and stepfather in the gallery, and he called them out and he talked about the need to pass police reform and police brutality in the United States. And then Tyree Nichols' mom did something that I think is absolutely amazing, which is point back to Congress, letting them know that it's their responsibility to make legislation happen. And my little political science heart just like absolutely jumped through the screen, because I was so excited that somebody actually realized that the president isn't the one that's in charge of everything. It's Congress that has to pass the rules. And I want to point out, especially for anybody that is interested or concerned about police reform and things like that, that it's actually not even a federal issue. It is a state and local issue. Policing falls into the purview of the state. That's why we have troopers and things like that. But then even it goes down further than that. So the county, here in Lee County, we have the county sheriff, we have an elected sheriff, so we have a voice and ability to determine how we want the policing to be undertaken by having the opportunity to vote for the sheriff. And if you're concerned about city police, like Fort Myers police, then you better get really concerned with who's mayor, who's city council, and work to get people who are aligned with your beliefs in those positions. Because in Fort Myers, the police chief is under the purview and under the management of the city manager, okay, which is overseen by the city council. So if you have concerns, that's where you should be directing your concerns. At the federal level, when we're talking about federal policing, we're really talking about things like funding, right? So funding different types of activities, funding training, as well as thinking about the things that they're going to ban and make illegal, right? So at the federal level, federal policing, Joe Biden had mentioned that ending the no-knock warrants, ending the chokeholds, things like that. And he was able to do that with the purview of the federal policing force under the FBI, CIA, and that kind of thing. However, in order to get things like that to happen at the local level, they have to use funding mechanisms and funding levers in order to essentially make that a reality. Okay. I just like to point that out because this has been a real topic of conversation for the past few years, going many years at this point, but really heated up in 2020 with the George Floyd protests and the murder of George Floyd. And people started talking about the policing. And for me, I always want everybody to be getting involved and aiming their energy at the right place. So I just want everybody to know this is why local elections, and like we were talking last week with the mayor of Fort Myers, Kevin Anderson, why these local elections, these nonpartisan elections, end up being really important because they are the ones who are hiring, appointing, and firing, if needed, to these police chiefs, right? They're the ones that are looking at how they're going to do different things if they're going to have federal oversight. And one thing that Kevin Anderson pointed out that was really fascinating for me that I remember reading it, but I hadn't really thought about it, all right, was that the free report, he actually criticized, the free report was put together as a alternative at the time by the city council and the mayor to investigate some of the issues that were happening at the Fort Myers PD. But they did that rather than submit themselves to a Department of Justice review, okay? And they did that so they could maintain some control over the results and what would happen. And it did give some public accountability, okay? But what Kevin Anderson was saying is that it actually didn't give as much public accountability as if they had done the Department of Justice. He actually went on record and said that he wished that they had actually done the Department of Justice review that would have then beholden them to make any changes that came up from that review. So basically, if by going the private route, by getting the free report and spending local tax dollars to get the free report instead of getting the Department of Justice, which would have been part and parcel of our federal public funding, okay? By doing that, it allowed for some accountability, but not necessarily as much accountability as what would happen. And it didn't require the city council or the Fort Myers PD to do anything. It was all a series of recommendations. So I thought that was it was a great point that Mayor Anderson had made, and it was really good from a public accountability standpoint and transparency standpoint. Great conversation. Definitely go back and watch the last episode, listen to the last episode to hear that full conversation, because there was a lot of great stuff that came out from there talking about what's happens here in the city. So that's all. I'm done and over with the State of the Union this week. Other things that are going on, I think everybody's gearing up for Valentine's Day. Kids are doing their little things in school, and I'm gearing up for my weddings in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll be able to navigate that when that comes along. And we're just holding tight here. We're over the holiday hump and we're into the new year and looking forward to what's next. Oh, one additional thing I did want to mention about the State of the Union that was interesting. And although I didn't see her on camera, I had read that the Fort Myers Beach Chamber of Commerce president had been invited to the State of the Union by the First Lady, Joe Biden. And that was nice kind of recognition on behalf of us here who had been affected by Hurricane Ian and the continued business and recuperation of the beaches there. So that was interesting. I also read here in Southwest the congressman from Florida 17, which is just a little bit north of Fort Myers here, Greg Stubbe, who had been injured when he fell off a ladder doing some yard work in his home. He invited he called him his guardian angel, who is a man who was working, doing package delivery, Amazon or FedEx or something along those lines, who saw him fall and called 911 and helped him out. And so Stubbe had invited him to join him as his guest for the State of the Union. And I thought that was an amazing gesture as well. I had not heard an update on Congressman, hoping that he has continued his journey. It does look like they said his injuries were not life threatening, but they certainly didn't look nice. He's wearing a neck brace and things like that too. So hoping him a continued recovery in that space as well. Other than that, the other things that are really going on here in Fort Myers have to do with Black History Month as well. So coming up this weekend, there is the Martin Luther King Gala that is going to be held. That's a fundraiser for some local organizations. That should be a very nice event. There's a couple additional events around some musicians to celebrate Black History Month, as well as some historical events at Clemente Park. But overall, it wasn't too much. I know that we had, for us here too, especially in the political world, we go all the way back to Martin Luther King Day in January is when we have a lot of these cultural events celebrating Black history and celebrating Martin Luther King and unity and things like that. So there was a ton of events. There was the Martin Luther King Unity Breakfast on Martin Luther King Day in January. I don't know if that's why it feels like there's not that many events, or it's just a handful of organizations that have been doing some different events. But going back just for a moment on the policing issue, I do know that there was a wonderful community town hall that happened at Herman Church with Pastor Glover. Chantel had actually participated in that, as well as her mom, Darlene. You've seen her on the show as well. Having some real conversation about what it is that they want and expect out of community policing and how they're willing to work to get it done. My daughter's over there waving. So that was a really good event in sparking dialogue. And as we talked about with Mayor Anderson, it's got to go, the protest has to move beyond the demonstration phase. So it's okay for people to be mad as soon as things first happen, but in order to make substantive change, we have to articulate what the issue is, we have to articulate what solutions are, and then we have to commit to working towards them. And sometimes that work is really tough. Sometimes it's discussing with people uncomfortable topics, and sometimes it's convincing them and influencing them to believe that this is something that's of value. And actually, I was just on the phone with some colleagues talking about this earlier. I think that we don't always necessarily understand some of the nuances, and sometimes it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's position. We don't always know how what we say lands with somebody else. And there's a ton of times that we misjudge that. And I know that I have. And there was an incident, like I said, that I'm dealing with right now that's involved with this. And I'm genuinely convinced that the person who was saying things that were interpreted as being insensitive really just didn't have a lot of understanding that what they were saying was insensitive. Now, does that make it right? No, of course not. Is this a moment where we can have a tough conversation and make things better? Yeah, I think it is. And one of the things, and I want to talk about this, and I'm actually going to show this to Chantel so we can talk about it when we're together, is one of the things that came up with this. And this young man who is in a management position talking about it, and he was worried because he had afterwards he had some inclination that what he said was not correct, and that his worry then was that it was going to negatively affect his career. And he's seen, as has happened over time, over the last 20, 30 years, as people have been more acutely aware of differences in opinion and diversity and equity and inclusion and all of these scary woke words, right? But what's really come about is that, yes, there are people who have paid consequences, lost jobs, or things like that because of an instance, okay? And so what's happened is that people who may be making mistakes in how they're talking or interacting with people, rather than learning that what they're doing is hurtful, harmful, or could be done in a better way, right? They're just worried about the consequences because the consequences can be outsized compared to the infraction, right? So they immediately go on defense and it becomes a very toxic situation very quickly. I think that it's worthwhile for us to think about how we can have these conversations. And it goes back to one of the things I said in the very first episode of Juice here with Chantel. And that's that we need to have grace with one another, right? Yes, people will say things and do things that will make other people mad. People will say and do things that can be very insensitive. Sometimes they're saying it with intention and malice, and sometimes they're not. But it's worth coming up with a way to talk about or think about or work through that kind of conflict and help everybody build relationships, help everybody build understanding instead of making it a punitive thing. So, not ending friendships, right? Not ending working relationships, but having it be just a little bit easier to talk about things when they're prickly like this. And I know that's tough because it's a tough time right now, but I think that would be worthwhile. I think it really would because as I'm watching this situation in a professional capacity, two people who are both worried and both upset in different directions and not talking to each other. And the systems and institutions around us, I don't know if they're adequate to help them through, but we could. If we gave each other that space and that grace to have that conversation, the grace to make a mistake and the grace to do it better. But part of what's going to be necessary to do that is the desire to make it better. And that's where we have to really have our moment, right? Are we really coming to a situation in earnest? And are we willing to say, hey, I did make a mistake, or when I said that, or when I did that, I didn't realize how you were going to feel. I didn't realize how that may affect you. Because at this point, this is one of those things too, where one person's looking at it as a joke and another person took it very seriously, and it caused them a lot of fear and anxiety. And I think that we need to talk about that and why it is, and why it is that somebody would say and do something and think it's funny and really, like, genuinely not even pick up that it was something that was beyond the bounds of acceptability for somebody else. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll loop this back for Cheyenne. We'll get her, or not Cheyenne, we'll get this back with Chantel to get her response on that because I want to see what she thinks. I think that she might be on the same page with me because I think we're both of this like mind. I think it does both go back to the fact that we've been foreigners, right? We've traveled abroad. We know what it's like to be the American sore thumb sticking out and being the different type of person, and what it takes to be in a circumstance where you're going to make mistakes and how people can act and react to that in positive and negative ways. And I think that's where we can come around with some synergy to talk about that and expand that here in our local context in particular. Talking to myself, I'm running out of words here after 20 minutes or so. But I just wanted to make sure that we had this bit of a live session here today. Do check out our edited version. And if I could take a moment here, before I sign off here, let me tell you a little bit about the other things that we have going on here at Big Mouth Media, because we are really, we're really ramping up things here. And I'm so happy to be doing this podcast here with Chantel Road tonight. We've been friends and colleagues for years, and now we have this opportunity to share our knowledge and invigorate our community with conversation. We have more types of shows like this coming up here at Big Mouth Media. The 2023 is going to be an amazing year for independent media. So we have my daily show. So Dr. Cindy Speaks. I record every day. I do an overview of the news, a little bit of commentary on it. So you get about 15 minutes update quick, and then you are in the know for the day. So look for that Monday through Friday. Dr. Cindy Speaks. You can, of course, find it on, and all of our podcasts on the Big Mouth Media website, which is bigmouthmediafl.com. And you can find them where you listen to podcasts. All of our podcasts are also broadcast on Apple, Spotify, Audible, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. They're all there, okay? So you can put that in, you listen through your phone, you listen through your headphones, get those podcasts going for you and stay in touch with us. That is where our public content is, but we also have some really great content. If you want to watch the videos, you want to watch the full length special editions, you want to get invited to the events that we're going to have planned here for 2023, then we're going to need you to become a member. All right. So also launching next week, we're going to have our combo everything membership. That allows you full access to everything on Big Mouth Media, all of our podcasts, all of our articles, all of our special events. And that is going to be for $19.99 a month or $199 for an annual subscription. That again helps support independent media, helps to keep the lights on and going with our friends, helps me make sure that we're getting everything edited and out into for our friends here, and gets you all the podcasts. Now my little Evie here is trying to pop in. So there's my podcast, there's this. Don't forget that we have every week on Thursdays as well, we have Misinformational where Rebecca Jones launches, okay? So she's focusing on disinformation, misinformation, and making sure that you know the truth in Florida and across the United States. So check that out. That's a weekly show as well. We have a Democrat and a Republican walk into a bar that we hold every other week at Ollie's Records and Beer in Cape Coral. That's another one. Come out and check us out. We record that every other Sunday, not this Sunday because of the Super Bowl. Okay, but the following Sunday we'll jump right back in. That starts up at 4 o'clock. Doors open 4:30. We start the show. So come and have a pint with us and join in the conversation. And that then we also edit and have full-length videos available for our subscribers. We have more coming on the way as well. We have Universal Basic Podcast with Chris Croya. That is talking about economics and things that matter to working class folks across the United States, breaking it down for you and trying to make it so that you get what you need to make decisions. Also, speaking of getting what you need to know, we have starting in March, Now You Know, with Howard Sapp is going to be breaking it down. He is a community activist and former Florida legislature candidate who is going to be helping to provide some context and information for folks so that they know what they need to make sure that they can participate and vote. Aside from that, we also have Crystal Queer that will be starting up very soon. That is going to be focusing on LGBT issues. And we also have coming on board very soon our bilingual podcast, Dinner with Friends. That is hosted by Maury Carmen Hernandez, MC, a friend of mine. She is out of Miami, and that is going to be a casual conversation in both Spanish and English, talking about the news and events to the day, especially those that are affecting the Hispanic communities in Miami. So that is going to be another really amazing podcast. And don't forget to check out our articles. So we have articles that are written by independent contributors here in the Big Mouth Media world. Rebecca Jones writes some articles, I write some articles, and we also have a very special agreement with the Paradise Progressive to syndicate their articles. So amazing journalism coming out of there, making sure that you have the information that you need. Reading those articles are in depth and they give really good analysis and all of the resources that you need to verify all of the things that we say in our podcast as well, because we want you to be informed, okay? And that is it. And all of those podcasts and the pricings you will find on the plans and pricing page on the Big Mouth Media website. If you have not done so far, please follow us on social media. You can find Big Mouth Media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can subscribe to our newsletter on our website. And then, of course, you can buy one of our plans and become a member and help us support independent media here in Florida. So now I will say thank you for giving me this time and space this evening, and I will look forward to having a follow-up conversation with Chantel and getting that edited version out for you. Otherwise, we will see you next week, Thursday, 6 p.m., right here at Seed and Bean, downtown Fort Myers. Come here, get here early with us, and have a coffee and drink, get a little CBD and relax. and have a conversation on juice, fresh talk. Thank you. I have been your host for today, Dr. Cindy Banyai, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.